53rd chapter of the book of Tehillim is very similar to a chapter that we had earlier. It's very, very similar to the 14th chapter. The 14th chapter started, Lamnatseach David Amar Naval B'libo Ein Elohim. For the leader of David, the Naval, like the evil man, said there is no God, man's deeds are corrupted, no one does anything good, and God is not paying attention. That was back in chapter 14, and chapter 53 basically starts, and basically the entire chapter is pretty much the same. Lamnatzeach al machalat maskil David. For the leader on the machalat, a maskil of David. So again, a maskil, something to meditate about, some advice. And machalat, what exactly is machalat? There are those who try to say it's like a circle. Again, maybe with some sort of instrument, another thing that we're unclear about exactly what it means. Amar Naval Belibo, Ein Elohim, as I just pointed out, chapter 14 and 53 here. Same thing, Naval. Is Naval a person? Naval usually is just an insulting name, somebody who is not a good person, a scoundrel, whatever word you want to use. And as we pointed out back then, we'll point out again, one of the scoundrels during the life of David was Naval HaKarmali, Naval, who refused to pay David for the protection that David provided to his shepherds. And David got, to say a little bit upset is an understatement. He was ready to kill all of those men until the Bathsheba, the wife of Naval, and then later the wife of David, came and stopped him when he was enraged. So whether that person's name was really Naval, whether his name is a description, whether he was that person, because of that person, the word Naval became to know this, we don't know. But and the name is the description is a problematic one. So Naval says in his heart, Ein Elohim, there is no God. Now, question here, same thing we said back then, probably. Does he mean that there's no God, or does he mean that God doesn't pay attention? God does not care. Man's wrongdoing is corrupt and loathsome. No one does good. Because there's Ein Elohim, there's no God, there's nobody watching. Eino Setov, nobody does anything good. Elohim. God looks down from the heaven to find a man who is maskil, right? We started with maskil again. Is there a person who is searching for God, who is mindful in his search for God? Kulo stag yachdav, we're in pasuk dalid, ne'elahu eino setov ein gam echad. But there is nobody. Everybody is foul. There's no one who does good. Not even a one. Not even one person is doing what's right. Halo yadu poale aven. And so the evildoers who devour people as they devour food and do not invoke God, what's going to happen to them? Now here, the question is, we probably said this before, we said this before, that hold on one second. Charlotte is telling me she would sign in. Oh. Thank you for bearing with me. So what is talking to people in Bnei Israel, the cruel people who are fraudulent, who are taking advantage of others. And so different when it says here, hello, achlu ami achlu lachem, they devour people as they devour bread. The two different ways of understanding who this is referring to. Continuing in verse 6, Sham pachadu pachad lo haya pachad ki Elohim ze atzmot choneh hevisha Elohim me'asam. What's going to happen to all these people who say there are no God, I can do what I want, who are just devouring people the way somebody devours food? They will be seized with fright. a fright and scare that had never happened before. God will scatter their bones of your besiegers, of those who are all around you, whether that's, again, the enemies of Israel, or whether it's people amongst Israel are taking advantage and defrauding others, because God has rejected them. So God has rejected these people. And we think, of course, this is written by David, it's before. We think back to Sancherib, the kingdom of Syria, Jerusalem, blasphemy towards the Jews. What has him.
Looks like we
I think we lost Rabbi Mark.
He's
back.
Oh, he's coming back.
Oh, okay, good.
I don't know. So for sure not doing 2 chapters today. So continuing, we have continuing, right? So again, whether it's the defrauders of Israel or not, let's continue to verse 7, whether it's Bnei Israel or it's people outside Bnei Israel or attacking them. Mi yitain mitzion yeshuot Yisrael b'shuv Elohim shvutamo yagel Yaakov yismach Yisrael. So who is going to give Zion? Who's going to restore Zion and give and deliver it and save it? Who is it going to be? It's going to be God, is what he's saying. God is going to restore the fortunes of his people, and when that happens, Yaakov will be joyous and Israel will rejoice. So it's sort of a difficult sort of ending to this chapter. Is this referring to something that was in the life of David? Is it one of these chapters that was written way after the life of David? It's unclear. Sort of the same thing. And if you look back at chapter 14, I'll just read to you so you see the similarities there. Let's say in the middle of chapter 14, we had Sham pachadu pachad ki Elohim bedor tzadik, right? The idea of being seized with fright. And how does that chapter end? Mi yitain mitzion yeshuot Yisrael b'shuv Adonai shvutamo yagel Yaakov yismach Yisrael. The exact same words to end that chapter. So you could. It's hard to understand why we basically have the same chapter 2 times. I can't understand that. I'm not exactly clear. There are some small differences between the two, and there's small grammatical differences. I would say one piece of information we could take away from this chapter is the idea of people acting better when they are watched. Right? The Naval is saying, Bilibo, he's saying, God is not watching me, so I can do what we want. We know this. What people do in their private homes versus what people do when they are in public are oftentimes two very, very different things, the way that people generally behave. And in fact, there was a great rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, was one of the great, most important rabbis on his deathbed. His students asked him for advice, and he said, your fear of God should be as much as your fear of man. That's one of the things he said to them. They said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, when you see somebody watching, then you're going to behave. But when you think nobody's watching, then you do what you want, oftentimes people. So this chapter here, much like the 14th chapter, a lot in it regarding the idea of God's not watching. When God's not watching, people are more careful and act better when they feel that they are being watched. And I've heard that there are studies that have proven this in all sorts of different areas with tipping and just generally people's behaviors. When you think you're being watched, not surprisingly, you act better than when you think you are not being watched, and you can get away with anything that you do.